Hi there, and thanks again for tuning in. We are talking about crisis reactions, and I'm going to go into an area that I think is important, and that is how am I going to harbor these reactions? How am I going to make it? How am I going to put up with the fact that I have reactions that I don't know how to deal with? Let me tell you a story. There was a young man who contacted me a couple of weeks ago. He had a lot of anxiety to the point of that he didn't feel like he could handle it. And he also was one of these people that were extremely afraid of anything that has to do with medication and pills. One time when he had a panic attack last month, actually, he did go to the doctor, and the doctor gave him a pretty strong anti-anxiety medication. And this guy freaked out because basically he felt like he lost control. He did not appreciate the effect of the medicine, and it actually scared him more than it helped him. And a lot of people feel like that. They don't want to go that route of psychotropic drugs when they have anxiety. And again, that is not necessary when it is a normal crisis reaction. I'm not saying that all people should stay away from that, but what I'm saying is that there are other ways. And this guy, when he contacted me again and he said, I have this anxiety, and he said, you've helped me to allow myself to be in this when it comes and the anxiety level just skyrockets, and he says, I'm normalizing it just the way that we talked about. He said, but in the midst of all this allowing and normalizing, he said, how am I going to put up with it? And that's what's important, to see what can we do to harbor crisis reactions. Because God knows nobody feels like, oh, I'm in heaven now when I'm in the middle of a big anxiety attack or feeling really, really worried. Or I don't think anybody enjoys being down in the dumps and feeling blue and feeling depressed or having apathy or being angry and not being able to control the emotions. So therefore it is important that we talk about what can we do to harbor these crisis reactions, so we actually can put up with the fact that for a while I am going to be a bit off balance, and now it's not the time for solutions. Now it's a time for finding a way to be in the crisis and not escape or run away from something, but rather remain and harbor these feelings. Anyway, I talked to this guy, and I asked him, I said, normally what do you do? Do you have an activity that works for you? And he says, I'm usually very, very active. And then we started to talk about, how do you usually feel when you are physically active? One of the things that is a proven fact, and there's a lot of evidence that shows that physical activity, or the relationship between our physical bodies and our souls, how we feel mentally, there is a strong connection there. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that physical activity can be very helpful. Now, I asked him, what is your physical activity? And he said, where I live now, he said, we can still go out bike riding. I haven't been on my bike for a long time. And we talked about it, and I said, well, why don't you try to go out on a bike ride when you feel like the anxiety is stronger or when it's increasing? So why don't you just put on your gear, get out on that bike, and then just go to town and bike. Use your physical body to have activities that just helps you to get this anxiety, not get rid of it, because it's not going to get rid of it, but it's going to help you to harbor it. And this guy, he did just that. He used the physical activity. And he called me up yesterday and he said, Ulf, these bike rides are helping me tremendously. I just didn't see the connection that was right there in front of me. And he was so happy because one thing he told me was, I'm never going to take one of them pills again that made me lose control. But now when he is in control, he can't control the anxiety, but he can control his physical activity. And he says, it doesn't take the anxiety away, but it helps me to harbor it. Another woman with anger issues, she is so angry, and I've talked to you about her before. She is also in an area where she is allowed to take walks. Why I'm saying that is because I'm in Spain in quarantine and we are not even allowed to go out for a walk. So it's a little bit more challenging here. But when you are in an area where you are able to go out and exercise and take a walk. And this woman, she says, yeah, I choose to go out for a walk, she says, and behind my house, there is an area where there is nobody. And she says, I need to go out and walk. And when I walk, she says, I cuss and I yell and I scream and I am so angry. She says the physical activity in combination with just letting this anger out, she says, it helps me to harbor these feelings. So don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about that physical activity is going to take the crisis reactions away. But for some people, physical activity becomes a real key in order to put up with or harbor or at least be in this reaction. It's a way of not escaping or getting into a flight mode where you're wanting to run away from how things are. It helps you to be in the moment. So harboring is an important area to talk about. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about other things that some people do, because we need to be aware of one thing. There are no universal ways that works for everybody. Physical activity doesn't work for everybody. Look at me. I could use some physical activity. Well, it doesn't work for me when it comes to crisis reactions, but it works in other areas. But what I'm saying is, each person needs to find what works for them. And for some people, physical activity is very important. So stay tuned. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about yet another way to harbor crisis reactions so that we can get through this corona crisis together the best way we can. Have a brilliant day, and thanks again.